it's a great opportunity for me to be able to meet with you today and ask you a few questions, and I really appreciate you taking the time out for this. And the thing that we wanted to find out the most is about your role as an editor-in-chief for the Journal of Gastrointestinal Surgery. And I know that you do this with Dr. Tim Pollock as well. So just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got to being an editor for the journal.
How far back do you want to go?
Yeah.
No, I was born and raised in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I went to college in the University of Rochester in upstate New York, went to Tulane Medical School, and then came to Boston and have been here ever since. I came to Boston for my surgical residency, which I did at Beth Israel Hospital. At that time it was Beth Israel, now it's merged and become the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, of course. The residency was under Bill Silen, who was a real giant in GI surgery, a surgeon scientist sort of extraordinaire. He was actually president, as a surgeon, president of the American Gastroenterological Association, which is now, that would probably be unheard of, but because he was such a sort of highly regarded GI surgeon scientist. But in any case, that's where I did my residency, and then did 2 years of research during that time at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, and then stayed on faculty there at Beth Israel Deaconess for about 10 years or so, and then moved to Mass General in 2001, and I've been here for the past, 16 years or so. GI surgery has been kind of my home, and I was interested in GI research, again, from an early stage, and set up my lab when I started on faculty, and have been doing that for, I guess, the past over 25 years.
And then can you tell us specifically about how you got to the position of editor-in-chief within the journal, the ascent that you had specifically? Did you go through different phases within the editorial board ranks and so on?
Well, it's not quite like that. I mean, I've been involved in the SSAT for my entire career. I've always felt it was kind of my home in terms of GI surgery organizations. Obviously, there are more around, especially these days, but it's always been kind of my surgery home in a sense. So I've been involved in the SSAT and joined the editorial board of JOGS some number of years ago, actually. I started by John Cameron and Keith Kelly, who did a great job in starting this new venture for the SSAT and for all GI surgeons. And then Jeff Matthews and Charlie Yeo took over and really, did a fantastic job sort of raising the journal up. And then a couple years ago, they were looking for some sort of transition and having some help at the co-editor position. So they went through a fairly formal review process with interviews and so forth, and Tim Pollock and myself were chosen as the associate editors, which we did for a year or two before moving up to the co-editor role.
Okay, and so can you tell us a little bit more about what being an editor-in-chief involves, sort of on a daily basis and then weekly or monthly basis, basically?
Sure. I mean, the main goal, of course, is to advance GI surgery knowledge and research, and mostly JOGS is a clinical journal. Obviously, some translational work, some occasional basic science, but it's mostly for clinical GI surgery. And so the main job of the editors, in the end, is to try to get the best, highest quality papers published. Ones that are going to make a difference in the field, ones that are going to be have an impact, actual on clinical practice ultimately, and are sort of read and cited by other investigators and clinicians. So we mostly read papers, judge their quality, and again, ultimately make decisions on whether they're publishable in our journal.
Okay, that's great. And so, so from that, and given that you notably have a busy clinical practice, you have a busy research profile, you also have a lab, and you've also kind of been involved heavily in teaching and the recipient of the teaching award in the past as well. How do you balance all these things with the responsibilities of the journal?
Sure. There's a lot of multitasking that goes on. You're a very good multitasker yourself, Motaz, so I know you understand that. The good thing about the journal editor job is that you're sort of on your own timeline. Obviously Tim and I work very hard to try and make it a smooth process and an efficient process for reviewers and for authors, and get decisions back in as quickly as possible. I think that's only fair for authors. So you want to do it kind of quickly, but on the other hand, nobody is really punching a clock, and you can do it sort of between cases, after hours. So it's the kind of thing you can sit down at a computer and log on and go through a couple papers whenever you have time. I often wake up early on weekends and tend to do a fair amount of it then, but it's usually kind of between and after hours.
Okay, and so from that and from the experience that you've had so far, and also being an associate editor and of course a reviewer for multiple journals, is there any kind of advice that you would share with young faculty members or trainees who have been invited into an administrative role within a journal or an editorial board?
Yeah, I think it's important work, and I've always found it actually kind of fun. There's something exciting, at least for me, and hopefully other people feel the same way, about reading something new that has not been published, and kind of getting a first look at it. And it's a good way to keep up with your field, because it kind of forces you to sometimes look things up, or at least as you're reading through papers, you get kind of reviews on topics. And so I think it's a good way to keep up with your field and kind of keep sharp in a sense, and hopefully feel some of the excitement that I do about reading something potentially really new and innovative. Obviously not every paper changes the world, but you're always kind of looking for that.
So actually, I think you touched on a very important question that's on a lot of people's minds, and a lot of what we do in academia today is voluntary. It comes out of our own personal time for the most part. Can you think of any way in which we can incentivize a peer review process? Do you think that financially incentivizing the peer review process is something that should be done moving forward to help people submit on time and continue to do peer review?
It's an excellent question. Obviously, money is always a big issue and kind of in short supply, I suppose. The publishing world, my sense is, does pretty well. And so theoretically, the publishers could put some of their sort of profits or funds into the peer review process. And I haven't actually heard of that taking place, at least as of yet.
Let me just add another question here, because you mentioned there's potential for a lucrative industry within the publishing world, and as a result of that, we're seeing more of these scam journals and invitations and article invitations. Does the Journal of Gastrointestinal Surgery worry about this, or have any mechanism for identifying some of these journals, or do you sort of look into that yourself with any advice that you can provide people with?
It's a great question. It's something that really, I have to say, disturbs me. I'm sure, like other people, I have the same experience. I wake up every morning, look at my emails, and get at least 10 to 15 invitations for papers, review papers, to join editorial boards, all from publishers of, I would say, questionable sort of reputation and quality. It's obviously something that's proliferating almost out of control.
I think that your insight today in answering these questions has been extremely valuable. Actually, it's valuable to residents, it's valuable to fellows and trainees, but it's also valuable to junior and maybe even, I'd say, mid-level to senior level staff who are embarking on new positions within journals and editorial boards and so on. And so with that, I'd like to ask you a final question. Looking back first at your career and second at your role within the journal, is there anything that you think you may have done differently or that you would, in hindsight, with your experience now, regret or would see done in a better way?
Well, I mean, in terms of the journal and kind of review process, editorial work, I've been one to pretty much almost always say yes. That's that has its pluses and minuses, and I think people get a reputation maybe of being reliable and somebody who they can count on to, for example, do a review and do it in a timely fashion. On the other hand, it's maybe I've gone too far in my own career, obviously there's only 24 hours in a day, and you don't want to overload yourself with doing reviews. I think I tell people to be strategic, honestly. We certainly, from the editor side, for a journal like JOG, we so appreciate the work that people do. I mean, it's really amazing. We try to be careful about not overworking people. But it's clear that there's no way that a journal could have any sort of success or quality without surgeons, in this case, who are able to and willing to give up their time.
Okay, well, from the Society of Surgery, the Alimentary Tract, I'd like to thank you on behalf of our committee, the Resident and Fellow Education Committee, for donating yet even more of your valuable time to talk with us and provide us with this unique insight. And thank you again, and if there's anything else you'd like to add.
I appreciate your time, Motaz, and your efforts on behalf of the SSAT. I think it's really great. We need to bring in young people into this organization, people that are interested in GI surgery, and we want to get them involved in the journal. So, it's a great thing that you and your colleagues are doing.